Hi, this is J L Zaring with One Life Live, and I have 4 swords here today that I deem as trail swords, overlanding swords, off-road swords, swords that you can prune your yard with, swords that you can exercise with. So overall, they are really cool swords, all 4 of them. Now, I will grab this one first, and I think you can instantly recognize that it is made from the images of the Chinese war swords known as Dadao. And I'm sure there are different ways to pronounce that word. I'm simply saying it as I see it. So these are the Chinese war swords. This is a Hanwei model. And I'll go over the specs in a moment and test them. And what's very interesting is I read a lot of history about the Chinese war sword, and it goes back hundreds of years. It started off, they claim, as a agricultural tool, farming tool. Looking at these though, it seems more of a war sword, which also from studying of the history of it, that's exactly what happened to it. It went from a farming tool and then it escalated or improved into a war sword. And overall, they are heavy, balanced, but heavy, and for a very good reason. They're meant to be choppers and cutters. But with chopping, you want a little bit of weight. When I was in the fire department, guys actually loved the slightly heavier axes when going to the roof. If they had to use a hand axe, let's say the chainsaw gave out, they used the hand axe, they would use the weight, the momentum of the weight, not necessarily their strength. Because if you just used your strength, you would be tired in a few minutes. But if you use the weight of the blade, the falling weight, and this has a good weight, all of them do, then just by falling, it chips a piece of wood. Using no muscles with that downforce whatsoever. So this is the Hanwei one. Before I get started into talking about too much with them, I wanted to grab this quick info sheet, and this is what I researched. And you could also see these are old ancient blades, and they look very similar to all 4 of the ones I have here today. In fact, some have the 2 fullers in them, some have the 1, some have the little curly Q cross guards, others have none. But lo and behold, all of these replicate the older ones more or less. It just seems that possibly these newer ones might have slightly longer handles, except for the Condor one, and it's still slightly longer than the older ones. The older ones, the total lengths were about 31 inches, and I'll measure these, and the blades were about 20 inches. These were for the older ones. Now they however still had the weight to them of about 7 millimeters. That's pretty thick. A thick katana is about 7 to 8 millimeters, to give you an example. And just real quick, the blades are more or less around 21.5 and 37 inches. 31 would be about here, but that makes sense because I already mentioned that the older ones had smaller handles of about 7 to 8 inches. So all the older ones had slightly smaller handles than these. And the Condor one, which I will look at shortly, is the closest, truest length of the handle of about 8.5 inches, 9 inches. So these are a little bit larger, but I like the length. The length gives really good leverage to using two hands, back and forth motion that you can easily incorporate into your slicing or chopping. Now, why again am I talking about these? I mentioned earlier, I love swords. I know a lot of people that do, and they have them hanging on their wall, or just decoration. These are decoration, however, I also use them too. I use them, clean them, and then recoat them, which I'll go over in the future about cleaning, recoating, sharpening. And it is a blast to use these swords. As I mentioned on an earlier video, great reason to use your sword is simply pruning your front and backyard. And I also gave the little tip, don't walk into your neighbor's yard with a big sword because it might not be the best outcome for you. Just stay in your own yard, have fun with your sword, and exercise. So not only are you pruning your yard, you're exercising. Now on the trail, I know overlanders and hardcore off-roaders pride themselves with going the extra distance, so-called off the grid. And when you really get off the grid, going that extra distance, exploring those old trails that haven't been explored for so long, a lot of times you run into overgrown trails. And I'll tell you what, it's not fun when you're really excited to get to a particular destination and your trail is overgrown. It is fun, however, having the right tools, such as chainsaws, machetes, swords, that you can quickly jump out of your rig, hand out a few hand tools. They are the quickest, unless it's some big old log in the road, then maybe you could winch it out, or chainsaw it in half, then winch it out, or even roll it. But a lot of times they have branches on the logs that might need to be cut off, or it's just simply overgrown brush, anywhere from 3 inches, 2 inches, 1 inch, and it's really nice to grab something lighter. And it's fun. It's fun to wield your own sword, to have a reason to have a sword, to have a justification to have an awesome sword. And you know what? If you really want your two-handed longsword, then get it. Have fun with it. If you really want your katana or wakizashi, I think I said that right, wakizashi, it's fun. The wakizashis are, of course, a lot lighter than the katanas, but they can still have great chopping and slicing for just getting out there in nature and going the extra mile when you run into some brush and it's overgrown. I know it's kind of fun to show off your pinstripes on your rig, but it's not fun when the branches are so thick they're taking the paint off your rig. They'll leave pinstripes all right, but they're more or less permanent. So let's get back and look at these swords I wanted to go over. I left this Hanwei one out of the sheath because the sheath here is the worst of the four. Let me put this in, and you literally have to buckle and unbuckle both to get it in or out. And it takes a little bit of time rather than some quick snaps or something. So I left the sheath out. It's just a simple little sheath. That's the only true negative thing about the Hanwei. It looks solid. It looks like it has a nice full tang. I'm not quite sure about all the ceremonial red ribbons, But underneath, you can take this off if you want. You can definitely take this off if you want, or leave it on. It's fun. It twirls in the wind and everything. But you can take it all off and it looks like a nice wooden handle underneath. Then you have those cool loops, you know, because they were used to hold on to, and you can throw the sword and like slice everyone's necks off as the sword's going in circles. At least that's what the movies show. In reality, it's not really what it's for, though I have seen some people take advantage of the rings, and they're quite talented, and they do use them for swinging the sword. But in reality, in history, from what I read and saw, they were simply like a pommel, and they did not have a lot of metal hundreds of years ago in China, where they tried to conserve whatever metal they had. In fact, a lot of times they did not even have cross guards, and they simply had this little ring to help with the forging of the blade, and that's it. The ring was not used to hang from the belt or anything. You can see how long it would hang down. It was simply a little specification of the sword so you can grab it for forging, and that's it. But you can always say the cool thing about twirling it and all that, like the movie show, if you want to. But I told you the truth, so you don't look like an idiot if you really say it to some people. Now I'll go over the specs. And I'll do some quick measurements. The specs of the Hanwei Warlord Dadao. Overall length 37 1/4 inch. That is with a blade of 22 inches. Weight is 2 pounds 7 ounces, and it feels just about that. It comes sharp. I did test this one, and it easily catches my skin running it horizontally. That's the quickest way to test the blade. I mean, sure, you can cut paper and everything if you want, and it looks really cool if you do it right. But overall, just wow. Okay, as I said, if you do it right. Overall, I don't usually use the paper. It just dulls the blades really quickly. For training, though, I love using cardboard and wood, and that dulls the blades too. But I did test this blade, and it came very sharp compared to one of the other blades. I actually think it was the Condor that was pretty dull. Okay, the width goes from 43 millimeters to 93 millimeters. The grip length is 11 inches, more or less. And you can basically find this price for around $120. Even though it's advertised on other websites $150, I've seen it for $120, $125 on Amazon. Very nice sword overall. You know what? The only thing it doesn't say is what metal it's made out of. I'll have to check that later and put it on the video. This one, compared to the other three, is very pretty. I did feel the brass crossguard here. I can easily bend it. So I wasn't too impressed with that, except it's cool to have the brass there. It's very easily bent. You can see the two fullers, or if you want to be super cool, the Hollywood blood grooves, though that's not really what they're for. They're really, of course, there to just notch a little bit of a weight out of the blade, just to lighten it up a little bit. I did see a lot of these being worn on the backs of soldiers and policemen a few hundred years ago, and earlier, towards around the 1920s to the 1940s. And these were mostly used as a scare weapon to keep people in control. A lot of executions with this. But you know what? Let's move on from that and go to the modern day uses, which again, it's great for cutting and chopping. A nice thick spine, and the older ones were about 7 to 8 inches. So this is a little less, at about 6 to 7. There we go. High carbon steel blade, which I already knew that, but it's probably more or less around 1060. What I always do, I think Emma, my dog here, let me know that Mama's home. What I always do is test the blades against this hard wood, because I have tested some cheaper blades in the past where wood can actually damage the blade. And to me, that shows me that something is wrong with the metal, because the metal really should not get damaged by hardwood. Go around, Emma, find Mama. Also, I don't test these through metal because I already know they can puncture metal. But if you have a really fine edge on these, you can almost, go get her, Emma. You can almost guaranteed to damage the blade with maybe rolling it a little bit or quickly doling it. But I do take a nice stab, and it goes right in. And I do take a nice hit. Take a nice hit. I examine the blade. I test before. It's all the same. Tip is fine. It's overall a nice sword for $120. Just not the sheath. Okay, why don't you go around and see her? Okay? Yeah, go around and see her. Oh, she's happy. You want to come say hi to the camera real quick? Come here. Come here. Oh, come here. She's a happy girl. Okay, I'm back. I had to let that doggy inside so she can see Mom, because as you can tell, she was very happy. You know, dogs have these hearing where they can just memorize the exact sound of a car or engine more so than we ever can. So she hears Mom about a mile away. Okay, what am I holding here? I'm sure a lot of you will recognize this as the Condor. And the sheath is mediocre. It's leather. Okay, at least it smells like leather too. It's not synthetic leather. Easy to snap off. Easy to take out. It has a really good weight to it. The handle is a lot smaller than the Hanwei sword, and it's more closer to the specs of the older swords. Not saying that's good or bad, just making a point. This is the sword that I was disappointed with for the blade. It's just not sharp. It's let me correct that. It's sharp, but only mildly sharp. So it doesn't catch on your skin when you test it. That's the best way. It just glides. And it should really catch to be that sharp. It has two fullers, a nice implemented cross guard there, full tang. This sword, however, is on the lesser price and a good quality, so a lot of people like this sword, and I can see why. The quality overall is nice. You can of course sharpen it, and you can find it for around $90 for this heavy of a weight sword. It did not go in as deep. Of course, the tip is fine. It did not I had to put a lot more force on it simply because the blade is more dull compared to the Hanwei sword. Now, I've seen other videos with this sword deemed as sharp, and it's worked excellent. The blade is not as long, so I cannot get as good as a handle chop motion with it. But for what you get and for the quality, it's a good sword overall. I would recommend it. I would just warn people that the one I received was not sharp. Let's find the info on that one. Here it is. It was really hard to even find the Condor website. 32 inches overall length. Blade is 21.5, slightly smaller than the first one. 3 pounds. As I said, it had some weight to it. The thickness of it is 5.7 millimeters. I will check that. Grip length is 9 inches. Yeah, just over 5. Just over 3. Okay. I'm simply looking really quick, and again all it says is high carbon steel. It was hard to find for those first two just the type of steel they use. I couldn't find it. But I'm going to be guessing more or less around 1055, 1060. Okay, now, after I'm done with this sword, we are going to go to the lightweight. This right here is the cold steel machete. They call them machetes because they are lighter than swords, and so they can be used for lighter work or heavier work. The sheath, it's okay. 3 snaps, quicker than the Hanwei one. And it's nice overall. It says cold steel, South Africa. And when I checked the blade, it was sharp. Let's see if I can get that paper thing going again. So it's a sharp one. Much sharper than the Condor. Make sure I don't hit anything over here. It's very light, but not light in the respect as like feather light. When you grab it, you can still feel the weight with it. It's just not as thick, but as you can tell, it's wide. It's just not as thick. You see the movement of the blade a little bit? I'll show you again. See how you can flex it a little bit? But flexing's not necessarily a bad thing for 1055 carbon steel. It just means it gives a little bit so you don't have damage. Now I used half the amount of strength and downforce compared to the Condor, and it went deeper than the Condor sword. The reason, obviously, is it's very well sharpened. It comes out of the box sharp. And that's nice. I have to admit it's nice. It has a, I believe it's called a polypropylene, something like that. Handle, very strong, strong ring. Check the width on this. Just over 3, almost 3.5, and that would be about the same width as the top portion of the Condor sword, and it's the same width all the way down. Nice straight blade. So, is this a bad sword because it is so light? Maybe if you were chopping really big heavy branches or big heavy logs. But I know in my yard, a lot of yards, backyards, front yards, and going out on the trail, it's mostly smaller. It's not big logs or big branches. It's usually between 4 inches at the widest, which is a pretty thick branch, all the way down to, you know, 1/2 inch, 1/4 inch, 3 inch, 2 inch, especially on the trail when there is a designated trail but it's overgrown. It doesn't have 4-inch branches overgrowing the trail. It usually has anywhere from 1/4 inch or less, 1/2 inch, 1 inch, and this, no problem. This can take care of it easily. Now, why would you want a blade like this over the other ones? And you know what? The weight savings is the advantage. You're not going to get as tired. You're going to have more fun actually with this, because you don't need to lug around all the weight. Or there are all different sizes and makes of people in this world. So, some people want a smaller sword, some people want a lighter sword, some people want a longer sword. This can definitely be more for the people that want a lighter weight sword and they're going to be happy with the performance. More than happy. I've already used this in the backyard, cutting some branches, and it was like at home with cutting the branches. It was nice. And all for how much? About $30, $35 for this sword. It is beyond excellent value. 1055 carbon. Chinese sword machete. Let's see here. Molded polypropylene handle. I was right on that. 41 ounces. It says 2.8 millimeters thick. I measured it as a tad over 3. So they're being a little generous there. 24-inch blade length. 14-inch handle. There you go, 1055 carbon steel with black baked on anti-rust matte finish. That's a big plus. Just like if you have guns or other swords, they have the protective finish on. Same thing. Overall length, 38 inches. Much longer than the older swords, but not all. It's not longer than all of the older swords. I have seen longer older swords. And now I wish I didn't... Oh, actually I didn't even mention the weight. I was going to say the weight of the Condor. Oh yeah, I did. It said around just had over 3 pounds. But you know what? It's close. It's longer. Even though it's lighter, it still feels very nice. You know, for these older ones, they're 42 ounces in weight. And that is actually right on with this one. So the older ones were the same weight as this one. And they handled great. They were just thicker in the spine and shorter. Okay. You know what? I'm just going to leave it out of the sheath because I'm going to get some close-ups in a minute. But I have one more. Where is it? This is the heavyweight. The heavyweight champion, cold steel, Chinese war sword. And I'll tell you what, as soon as you take this out of the box, as soon as you see the sheath and grab it and take it out, you're impressed. In fact, from here, I can smell the leather of the sheath. Not even having to... From there, the leather is nice. Really strong sheath. Double layered up here with a little nice design. By far, the sheath beats all the other sheaths. And we haven't even gotten to the sword yet. Mind you, before I get you all excited about this, this one is the more expensive of the 4. I will also say it is worth it for the expense. Maybe not worth it for what you're looking for, but worth it for the expense of what you're getting. And Amazon is a great place to get it. I don't know about you, I love the smell of leather. Okay, this has a nice beefy handle. It has a nice wrap. It even looks like it's wrapped with ray skin. I don't know for sure, I'm just saying. The cord is very nice. A very strong cross guard. And yes, I tried to bend the cross guard like the brass one. And no, I could not bend it. This one is nice. Now, that did test my wrist a little bit, but I have a hurt wrist to begin with. Don't ever drill on your car or rig with a big old drill and step up the drill bits too quick. It might just catch and rip your wrist to pieces. So, back to the sword. It has a lot of goop on it. I had to wipe the goop down. And you know what? Of all the ones I looked at, this one was the best packaged sword. I am going to speak about the current cold steel packaging. It is superb. They come in black boxes and they are fully wrapped, fully bagged, fully secure, not moving in the box, nothing poking through when you get it, points not poking through, the cross guards not poking through. So many swords I get, all those different things are poking through and slowly being worn or rust marks on there. This one was immaculate. That's a pretty big word. Okay, I'm going to skip that word. My tongue doesn't want to say it. This one was superbly packaged and greased. Is it sharp? of all the ones I tested, this one came in first place for sharpness, tied to the Hanwei and the Cold Steel Machete for second place sharpness, to the Condor last. Stuck nice. Let's see it sideways. I'm trying to bend it like the Machete. As you can see, it doesn't bend, or barely. When I used this earlier, I barely have to use my own strength. It's almost kind of closer to the fire department axes I used to use, where you let the head just kind of fall. And it just goes right in. So, for a heavier chopper, stronger chopper, this is the one. Now, would you get a little more tired chopping smaller brush? Yes, you would. It's heavier. So there's pros and cons with this. This is the beast of them. You can be tough with it. You can throw this guy around. Coming close to 7 inches. The tip under 5. So it has a lot of good thickness, a lot of length. So it's not just the thickness, it's also the length. Okay, this is the MAA Chinese War Sword by Cold Steel. Gunmetal finish. Black leather handles, so that's leather underneath the cord. At least according to this. Looking at it, it looks like blackened ray skin, but that's just what it looks like. 61.9 ounces, and yes, I weighed it to test it, and it was just about that. So the older ones in history were more around 42 ounces. A lot of these are around 42 ounces. 61 for the heavyweight. Thickness 1/4 inch, more or less. Blade length 23 inches. Handle 15 inches. 1055 carbon steel. 38 inches altogether. Cord wrapped handle, leather scabbard. This is a nice sword for the heft and the quality. So if you want a sword to just really go to town with hacking trunks to 7-inch limbs, I think you could probably get through a 7-inch limb in less than 4 minutes, 3 minutes. Probably less than 20 strokes if you know how to cut right. So there you have it. Now, rating system from all the tools I have used in life. And you know, I base a lot of these tools from the tools I used in the fire department. And the reason why is because I saw how important it was to have complete, correct, functional tools, because you did not want to chance anything with a lesser tool when life depended on the tool, whether it was your own life or someone else's. So after you get that mentality down, I have kind of gone through in life when I search for knives and swords or hatchets, other tools, even just tools to work on your car. I try to get the most dependable, solid, well-rounded tool for the job. So on a 1 to 100 ranking for this cold steel sword, I would say overall it's in the 90s for the price. The price, you know, it is in the mid 250s. It is an expensive sword for basic cutting, but it's not too expensive for what you get. Some people can deem this a complete 100. Excuse me. I don't really give complete hundreds, but if I were to give something a complete 100, this one is really close. I just cannot really find anything wrong with it, or the packaging, or the conditioning, the grease, everything about it, the handle. So I'm sure some people would nitpick it and say it's in the low 90s. I'm saying high 90s to 100. This is a really good score. Okay, the Machete. It's on par with this one. High 90s to 100 for the price at what you are getting it. It's every bit worth $30 to $40 for what this thing can do. I have just swung this as hard as I can in the backyard. I have these big tree stumps from a brown barked eucalyptus. The bark is that thick. And I test these things with hacking through the bark, then into the trunks, and checking the blades, and this thing did great. So for the price and the versatility of this blade, in the 90s to 100. Yeah, I'll put heavyweight front, lighter weight second. But the lighter weight is a good contender. Okay, in backwards order, the Condor. For what you get, around $90, $95, I'm going to give it I'd say high 80s to low 90s. Actually, I just thought right back to the high 80s. Here's why. If I'm going to spend close to $100 on this type of blade where it says completely sharpened, I don't want to sharpen it when I get it. And when I immediately test it and it's a dull type sharp, I'm annoyed because it would take me quite some time to sharpen it. Or I have to pay, you know, $20, $30 to have it sharpened. Overall, the handle's smaller. I have to admit that it's nice for hacking and cutting into brush and branches. It's nice having the longer handles. If you were more into true specs of history, here you go. Shortest handle here. 2 fullers, nice. Metal, nice. Came packed decent. Oiled well. It's just a few little odds and ends that rank it just slightly below these. Now remember, it's all based on price too. So I'd say mid 80s, high 80s, almost 90. If the blade came sharp, I would have said low 90s. It's not sharp though. Here's the difference. See the handle? See the blade length? So it's just at a disadvantage. It's so much smaller. It was always kind of nice to have short axes so it doesn't hit the ground and hit things in the fire department, but in reality, a longer axe, a heavier axe, could work better when you're actually working. So it's nice to be able to have this longer handle and grab it here, come up, come down, almost like it's an axe. Okay, last but not least, the shiny bright red. Shiny, red, bright. This is like jewelry almost. It's pretty. It is beautiful. Beautiful, pretty. Came sharp. I like that. The blade is nice. Okay. This sword was around $120. So it was not an extreme price. Now, this grip, it's mediocre. I don't know how strong it's going to be. It's really thin, but it's nice in the hands, but it's really thin. It's going to get really dirty. You can take this off. The brass I can bend with probably about 3 fingers. 3, 2. So I don't like that. I don't like that I can easily bend this brass. But it's cool. So if you like brass, if you think brass is cool, there you go. This is your sword. It's balanced nice. I would have to give it high 80s. If you like the brass, I would say low 90s. Some things are just a little smaller, a little less. Even though it said 3 pounds, I'd have to remeasure it. It just doesn't feel like it's 3 pounds. It feels like a 2-pound sword for some reason. It feels no heavier than the Machete. So that would be just under 3 pounds for that one. So yeah, I would have to give this high 80s, low 90s if you love the brass. So there you have it. I'm going to get some close-ups of the 4 swords so you can see the close-ups, and I will try to line them up all at the cross guards. And what I'm going to do is obviously start with the first one first. And what I mean by the first one is the more or less the highest rated one. So again, this one was rated 99, 100, even though I don't really give 100s. And it's more or less between $225, $250 on Amazon. It fluctuates, and you can find it less than that, around 200. They do have a higher version of this, if you could even call it a higher version. It's the polished one, and that one runs, I believe, $280. And that is also 1060 carbon steel, where this is 1055. Also, I just wanted to point out, you notice the first 2, they have the black coating on it. That does help with the rust, as all of these rust, and after they are used, they need to be cleaned. A good way to clean them is with like a light rag and mineral spirits, for example. You can get that on Amazon as well, or your local store. Some people, that's all they do. I go a step further and then use a silicone cloth or silicone spray, or you could even use silicone oil and a silicone cloth. Basically, it's to protect it, especially if there's any leftover dirt. And I'll go over it in more detail later, and other alternatives of how to maintain your swords and knives. But those were just some quick tidbits that you can use in the meantime. Okay, let's do some close-ups now. As you can tell, nice, thick, strong handle there with that black thread. Nice cross guard, very strong. I could not bend it. Very nice thick blade. As you can see how thick the spine is. Going on to the second sword, which is the machete, the lightest of them. It is the thinnest, but still very strong. Nice handle, very nice strong grip. And then to the Condor. Again, excellent full tang, very thick. Also thick spine. Also by far the shortest. And now heading to the Hanwei. Thinner spine up top. As you come down, it gets thicker. Beautiful brass crossguard. But weak. There's the handle. You can see the wrap is much more thin compared to the other one with the wood underneath. And this circle feels more thin too. Mind you, you can take that off if you want. And here is the sheath. Again, this is in order, matching the ones on the board. So this is to the MAA cold steel. Very nice, thick. There's the lighter one, which that lighter one was even better, or at least the same as the last two. I'd even say better, because this one has stitching and rivets. This was the worst one. This is the Condor. Takes a very long time to strap. No rivets, weak stitching. And then you have the Hanwei. It's just really thin. It works though. I sure hope I didn't get those last two mixed up. You know, maybe I did. What do you know? I did. But I caught it, okay? So, regardless, those two last ones are cheap. This one's cheap too, but much better quality than these last ones. You could even see the end guard. Extra guard here for the tip. Well, okay, there you have it. The best thing about this information of these swords is you now have the justification to buy them. You have an awesome, excellent reason to get these swords or sword for your backyard, front yard trimming, for off-road adventure. I mean, for me, that's exciting and awesome. I love swords. I love great tools, fun tools for that matter. And this is just the touch of the iceberg as far as swords are concerned. You could look behind me and you know there's the other types of swords as well, and the katanas and the longsword. Now mind you, they all do a little different things from the other, but for the most part they can be used for on the trail, for at the house. And again, now you can put it on the wall. It'd look great on the wall, great conversation piece, and then you could yank it off the wall and use it. Have fun with it. And most of all, you know, try to incorporate doing it at 15 to 20 minutes at a time. Now you have the physical activity for the lungs, heart, and guess what? The mind. Muscles are given. You're going to use your muscles. Cardio, though, that's why I mentioned the lung and heart first, is by far extremely important. So when you wrap all those things up in one, it's a no-brainer to get one of these and have fun. I think that rhymed. I did not mean that. But anyway, thank you very much. Again, please like, please subscribe, please have fun and watch the other videos coming your way. And I think I mentioned earlier that will extend from everything from on the rig to off-road stuff, off-road supplies, off-road tools, off-road emergency electronics and tools as well. So there is a lot to be covered, and swords is just one exciting facet, I guess you can say, or area to talk about and throw in there, because now you could have your overlanding sword or your 4x4 sword or off-road sword, whatever you want to call it, it can be yours. So have fun, hope you enjoyed it, and take care. Hey, I'm back. But I think I'm only back once this time. If I forgot to tell you, they are all full tang. I know I mentioned that and showed you on the Condor because you can easily see the tang running down. But on the other ones, you can see where it's pinned, following down the handle or through the twine, the braided twine. And they are all full tang. And that's it. I think I got everything covered now, so take care and see you soon. Thanks.